Bryce Elder added a cutter this weekend, and I think it's the continuation of a really awesome trend for Braves pitching. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your daily source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to fanduel.com to get started. Those of you who maybe you hear it on audio, video, you definitely see this different locations. So if I sound different, this is a portable setup. I am currently in Columbus, Ohio, recording this in my sister's basement. My nephew's third birthday was Saturday, so I was here for that. She's having a baby early this week. By the time you hear this, I'll be back on a plane flying back to Atlanta. But if you hear anything different, if the audio quality is subpar today, my apologies on that. A lot of stuff to get to that I just wasn't able to cover the end of last week or the weekend, right? We saw roster moves out of camp. We're going to talk about those and what they mean for opening day. James Karinchak was a bit of a surprise, right? We're going to talk about some of the other performances we've seen, right? Jose Suarez and J.R. Ritchie on Sunday, Didier Fuentes on Friday versus the Yankees, what he was able to do and what that means for the opening day roster if he has a shot, right? But before we do that, I want to talk about, and you guys knew this was coming, on Saturday, Bryce Elder unveiled a cutter. He threw a cutter. Now, let's be clear here. This is not the very first cutter of his career. Bryce Elder, in regular season games, so I didn't count spring training here, but in regular season games, Bryce Elder has thrown 7,100 pitches at the major league level. Exactly one of them was a cutter. On July 30th, 2024, Bryce Elder threw a cutter to get William Contreras to ground out in the sixth inning of a 5-1 Braves win. But this weekend, we saw Bryce Elder throw 6 cutters in his 78 pitches. And I want to talk about, one, his cutter, because clearly that's my brand. That's what I do. I got so many pings on Saturday when he did it. People saying, hey, did you see this? Heads up. You've been asking for this for over a year, which that is true. I've been asking Bryce Elder to throw a cutter for a while. Let's talk about his cutter specifically, but let's also talk about what this means for the Braves on the whole, because this is the continuation of a trend that I think is really, really important for the Braves. So on this cutter, the thing to know about a cutter is I talk about this a lot as a bridge pitch, and we're going to get to that. But what a cutter typically is it's like the hybrid of a four-seam fastball and a slider. And the real question when it comes to cutter usage is, which direction are you leaning? Are you leaning more towards the fastball? Are you leaning more towards the slider? Or are you legitimately sitting in the middle between the two? Because that ideal cutter, that kind of true cutter, is typically 3 to 6 miles an hour below a four-seam fastball, right? It's not enough of a difference to get called an off-speed pitch or a breaking pitch, but it's not the true velocity of a fastball. It's kind of in the middle, right? From a movement perspective, it has some of the glove side movement of a slider, but not as much as you would normally see, right? So you kind of see why it's a hybrid. That true cutter that you think about, 10 inches of vertical break, 3 to 6 inches of horizontal movement towards the pitcher's glove hand. That's the classic, the true cutter. Think about Mariano Rivera. It's a great example. Doesn't have, like, a lot of the horizontal movement is really late. And so that true kind of cutter often can end up breaking a dude's bat. That was Mariano Rivera's whole thing, right? That's a true cutter. When you lean more towards the fastball, it's still classified as a cutter, but you can just kind of think of that as a cut fastball. The vertical break is closer to that of a traditional four-seamer. The velocity is closer to that of a four-seam fastball. but it does have some glove side movement. Corbin Burns is a great example of this. His primary pitch is a 94, 95 mile an hour cut fastball. It's technically a cutter, but it leans towards the fastball side of cutter versus the slider side of cutter. The third type is a slower cutter, a breaking ball style cutter. I jokingly call them baby sliders, but they tend to have a little more drop, a little less horizontal movement than a traditional cutter. Yu Darvish is a great example of something like this here, where it's kind like it's they just lean into a different aspect and more towards a slider than a true cutter or a cut fastball. Bryce Elder's pitches from Saturday really kind of look to be more of the slider-ish cutter, right? High 80s velocity on this. He was like, I think it was like 5 mile an hour difference from his four-seam fastball from what he was throwing in that game. And when you look at the numbers of what Elder did on his cutters, 3 inches of horizontal break, 11 inches of induced vertical break, and the way he used them was really interesting. And we'll kind of get to all of that. He got 2 whiffs on the pitch, by the way. I'm sorry, he got 1 whiff on 2 swings. Only threw 5 of them. They were all to lefties, and it kind of looked like he was trying to work it inside to lefties and kind of bust them in. But we'll get to all of that in a minute. The thing here for Bryce with this pitch specifically, and the reason that I like it, and if you go to the newsletter today, bravestoday.com, I have a bunch of like pitch plots and stuff that kind of flesh a lot of this out. But I think the way this helps him is the sequencing. Sinker slider is his primary thing. So the goal is you throw a sinker down in the zone to get ground balls. It's going to move to the arm side. And then you're trying to drop sliders below the zone to get chase and to get whiffs. And in recent seasons, he's ramped up how much he throws that slider. He's up to like 35% now. But Bryce Elder's primary issue has been losing the location on the slider, leaving them hanging in the zone, and they get launched 570 feet. When Bryce Elder misses on a slider, it is a meatball and it gets destroyed. And so what my hope is that Elder's able to use the cutter like a baby slider, a little bit better locations. If for some reason he doesn't have the slider when he faces a righty, he can pull. He can pull out the cutter and try to use the cutter to maintain the same kind of late movement below the zone locations, trying to get whiffs or weak contact versus throwing a slider that's going to hang, right? I actually think when you look at how his four-seam velocity has grown, right? And if you remember, last year he averaged like almost 93 on the four-seam fastball, 92.8. And 48 of the 51 hardest four-seam fastballs in his career came in the last 3 months of last season. I actually think the cutter works a lot better as the bridge pitch between the four-seamer and the slider. Like, I like the vertical difference there better than the horizontal movement from the sinker and the slider. So kind of the way that I hope that he uses this is as some sort of bridge pitch when he's working four-seam slider and trying to do stuff vertically, and as a slider replacement when he's going sinker slider and doesn't have locations on the slider. But I like the idea now that if he's doing four-seamer or slider or even sinker slider and somebody's sitting one and just fouling off the other, and typically the way you do that is if you think about what Philly did against Pitcher Strider in the 23 playoffs, they sat the slower pitch. They sat on the slider and they just fouled off the four-seamers. And Strider's response to that was to start pumping 99, 100 on the four-seamer. Bryce can't do that. But now that he has a cutter that would be a third velocity band in the middle between the two and would be a different movement profile from the four-seamer, it gives him another option, right? Just gives him a little more versatility. The thing that I'm curious about how he's going to use it or not is all 5 of them that he threw on Saturday came against lefties. And really, lefties are not Bryce Elder's problem. Last year, right-handed pitching hit 301 with a 498 slug against Bryce Elder. Now, by contrast, lefties, the batting average was 62 points lower and the slug was 107 points lower. And to righties, Bryce Elder is almost entirely sinker slider. 90% of his usage is sinker or slider. So he threw all 5 of those cutters to lefties on Saturday. But my hope is that he pulls it out against righties simply because he's not good enough against righties. And he has the full arsenal that he's comfortable using against lefties. And if he's not going to go cutter against righties, he needs to figure out something else. And my hope really here is that this can just be some of the consistency, right? This could be consistency for Bryce Elder. Last year, and this came up a lot in the Chris Bassett conversations that we had. 50% of Bryce Elder's starts were quality starts. And while the average quality start, the bare minimum for quality start is 3 runs across 6 innings, which is like a 4.50 ERA. That's not what Bryce Elder did. In Bryce Elder's quality starts, he had a 2.23 ERA with an average of 6 2/3 innings per outing. When Bryce Elder is good, he's really good. The problem is when he's bad. The non-quality starts last year, 9.75 ERA, 69 runs in 63 2/3 innings. He averaged less than 5 innings an outing and almost 5 runs per start. When Bryce Elder is good, he's really good. When Bryce Elder is not, he's not. And my hope is that adding this cutter is the beginning of just finding ways to mitigate the bad outings, right? When he doesn't have the slider location, hopefully the cutter is another pitch that he can command like a fastball, but has enough slider-ish movement to replicate what the slider does for him. And again, I'm hopeful that that's going to be his game plan against righties. There may be, if that is the thing, if that really is the plan for this, there may be outings where you rarely see the cutter. And then when he is struggling with keeping the slider down or getting it in the zone when he needs to, he pulls out the cutter. Or when guys start sitting slider, right? Like he's able to do what he wants with it, but they're sitting and they're looking for it. He can give them a slider look out of the hand, but the ball doesn't drop as much, and he can go over their bats, get a strike, whatever with the cutter. That's kind of my hope here. In just a second, let's talk about the bigger story with this, though, right? Because this is a continuation of a trend, and we'll talk about that next. I think it's a big deal right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby here from my sister's basement in Columbus, Ohio. Again, by the time you're listening to this, I'm on a flight, hopefully on a flight back to Atlanta. It's supposed to be bad weather in Atlanta tomorrow morning. So some happy thoughts would be great. But if the audio sounds different, I apologize. That is why. Should be back to normal tomorrow. All right, Bryce Elder out of the cutter. We all knew I was going to talk about it. But I do think this is part of a bigger story. So as a lot of us are aware, Rick Kranitz was no longer the pitching coach after 2025, and they hired Jeremy Hefner. And this is not me going to spend 10 minutes talking about Jeremy Hefner. I did the podcast survey. Somebody complained about that. Whatever. I'm not here to talk about that. But I am here to talk about the trend that we've noticed. Because before that change at the major league level, there was a change where Paul Davis, the minor league pitching development coordinator, left after the 2024 season. So there's been 2 significant changes in Atlanta's pitching development. I would argue there's no more important jobs when it comes to pitching in your organization than your major league pitching coach and your minor league pitching development coordinator. Clearly, we know Jeremy Hefner replaced Rick Kranitz. We don't have the official announcement of who is the new pitching development coordinator. I think it's Bo Henning. I don't know for a fact. But what I've noticed is over the last calendar year, talking about the 2025 minor league season and then 2026 in spring, we have seen a lot of Braves pitchers aggressively expanding their arsenals. All right, think about Hurston Waldrop last year. Hurston Waldrop had struggled in his 24 call-ups. Sean Murphy is in the minors with him in Gwinnett as Murphy's rehabbing. And Sean Murphy says, hey, you should throw a sinker. Sinker, two-seamer, similar pitches, whatever. He adds that. He also adds a cutter. When he comes to the major league level last year, he looks phenomenal because he had a severe issue with a dead zone fastball. His four-seam fastball did not have great backspin, did not have great horizontal movement. And so hitters instinctively, based on his arm angle and his release point, there's like a built-in mental framework that hitters have just created over hundreds of thousands of swings in their lives of what a fastball out of the hand is going to look like on the way to the plate, where it's going to end up and all of that based on what it looks like when you throw it. And Hurston Waldrop's four-seam fastball very, very much followed that mental model that hitters have. We call it a dead zone fastball. It is right where you think it's going to be. And so the big change for Hurston Waldrop at the urging of Sean Murphy was to add the two-seamer sinker. Can't remember off the top of my head exactly which one it was. Add the cutter and mix those up significantly in the at-bats to keep hitters from sitting on a bad four-seam fastball shape. Makes sense. We saw that. We saw J.R. Ritchie, who was throwing all three fastballs. He was not an all three fastball guy when he got in the organization. He is now an all three fastball guy. We saw things like that in the minors last year. We also, even this spring, we've seen, it's not a huge sample, but we've seen more stuff. Ritchie also added what he's calling a Vulcan split, which is I guess his version of a hybrid between a Vulcan change and a splitter. He pitched on Sunday. I need to see a little bit more of these so I can kind of dive into the movement of this pitch and get a few clips of it. I'll have that hopefully on the newsletter this week where I can take some time to dive. Maybe I'll do it on my flight if I have Wi-Fi on my flight. Just dive into what the Vulcan split looks like, why it's different from a splitter, why it's different from a Vulcan change, right? But dive into that. He's added that. Joey Wentz added a two-seamer. Right now, not like it matters. He's out for the year with torn ACL, but he added that. Grant Holmes made some changes to fix his four-seam fastball. His significant one was kind of a grip change, altering the pressure on the ball, some of that stuff, right? Ronaldo Lopez working on his changeup. I think Ronaldo Lopez is trying to get it more like a splitter, or like a split change, not a true splitter, but like a split change or something as well. So, and I do know that as an organization in the last year, the Braves have started throwing a ton of splitters. And this is all from the outside. I don't have inside knowledge on this. But I think when you look at some of the rapid changes the Braves made in the minor league level last year and what we've already seen over one offseason at the major league level, I think a lot of this is being driven by the new pitching development. And one of the things that they're big into is iteration, trying new things, trying new pitches, trying new grips, trying to adjust to see what works well for you, giving guys multiple options and trying to have robust pitching plans that can get around some sort of deficiency in your game that day. And I think this is a big deal. And I've talked about this before here on the podcast. I don't think Rick Kranitz was a bad pitching coach. He was very, very skilled at understanding the way to get the guys to perform as the best version of themselves on the mound in any given start. Understanding what makes these guys click, understanding how to go out and calm a guy down when you got to calm a guy down, understanding when to give him a breather, understanding how to motivate him and when to motivate him in a mound visit, all of that stuff. I don't think from the outside, again, that he was that great at the minutia, the details on some of this modern pitching stuff. Do you remember early last season, Chris Sale did not look like a reigning Cy Young winner. He was really struggling. His arm angle had dropped. His pitches were doing weird stuff, and they couldn't figure it out. And then they eventually did. They eventually got him fixed. It was, I don't consider I could very much consider myself an amateur pitching nerd. I don't think I'm that great at this. I sat down in an afternoon, dove into StatCast data, dove into some video, and identified like 2 or 3 little things. And I wrote a newsletter about it that, like, hey, here's what's wrong with Chris Sale. They did the same, they figured him out as well. But when Chris Sale talked about it, and the articles were written, and I believe this was old friend of the show, Justin Toscano of the AJC, who's now no longer with them, replaced by Chad Bishop, also a friend of the show. But the credit from Chris Sale didn't go to Rick Kranitz. And I'm not saying that he actively said Kranitz didn't help him at all. But in the article, he specifically talked about the help that he got in the bullpen from Spencer Schwellenbach and from Grant Holmes, that they were down there with the tablet. They were down there looking at the data from pitch to pitch, and they told him what to do differently. They told him what to change, and it worked. And so it really feels like those 2 changes, Paul Davis and Rick Kranitz, being replaced by, again, Jeremy Hefner, and I think Bo Henning is the minor league pitching development coordinator for the system. I don't know for a fact. I'm sure that I'll find out in the next couple of days, because there's going to be folks who hear this and DM me. But I believe it's Bo Henning now. And I think one of the big changes that you're seeing are these guys adding new pitches. Didier Fuentes pitched on Friday, and he's changed from his sweeper to a tight gyro slider. It's a very similar package to Spencer Strider, and what Strider was early in his career as a fastball gyro slider guy with a nascent changeup that he had to get better. I think this is a positive development. And I think if you're optimistic about Atlanta's ability to be at least a league average rotation this year, which I still am, it's because of this. Yes, you've had a ton of injuries. Schwellenbach, Waldrop, Wentz, all those guys went down. But the improvement we've seen from the guys who were sticking around, what we've seen in spring training, the results, the process we've seen to get those results, those have all been really good. And so if the guys are healthy, if you don't lose other starters for the entire season like Wentz or half the season like Schwellenbach and Waldrop, this rotation, I think, has a chance to be really, really good. I don't think they're going to be 2024, top 3 rotation in baseball from an ERA perspective, but top 10, probably top 5. I think they can do it with some health and some guys, Lopez's changeup being better, Holmes's fastball being better, things like that. But speaking of Fuentes, let's talk about his outing on Friday. And is there a spot for him on the opening day roster? We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby coming to you from my sister's basement in Columbus, Ohio. Again, think happy thoughts for me being able to make it back to Atlanta. Bad weather expected in Atlanta this morning. Delta's a little concerned about the flight, so we'll see what happens. You may get a second pod from this basement. All right, Didier Fuentes looked phenomenal on Friday, right? Facing the Yankees, just virtually untouchable. And it made me wonder, is there a spot to put him in the major league bullpen? So I asked Alex Anthopoulos about this back in December. And because I'm traveling, I don't have the clip in front of me. But long story short, and I have the quote, I just don't have the video clip of him answering me. What he said was they've prioritized guaranteed innings over using guys in relief. Quote, in the minor leagues, you stick to these guys in the rotation from a development standpoint, right? Even though you ultimately might believe that they're relievers, you want them to get as many reps as they can, as many innings as they can have, bullpen, side work, go deep into games. You have a guy who's a 1-inning reliever, you might have a 10-pinch inning and never really get to work on things. That was his explanation to me when I flat out asked, like, why don't you use starting pitching prospects in the bullpen? And he did point out, like, they've done it some. Max Fried did it, Strider did it, AJ Smith-Shawver did it. But for the most part, it's the thing they've stayed away from. And he also kind of explained, too, that they've just always had enough pitching options in the bullpen where they didn't need to throw a starter back there. But I think the difference here this year, while I'm thinking about this for Fuentes, is because you're in a different calculus now. When you went into spring, the way that they were looking at constructing the bullpen, and AA told us this in spring training. Coming into camp, their 5 starters were going to be Sale, Schwellenbach, Strider, Lopez, and Holmes. So your 2 long men in the pen were going to be Bryce Elder and Joey Wentz. And I've gone on the record as saying that Bryce Elder's never been a reliever. It's probably a waste of, because his number one ability is giving you innings. And having him as a long man in the pen is kind of a waste of that. You should temporarily run a 6-man rotation and use him as a starter, or you should trade him before you throw him in the pen as a long reliever. And clearly, that's been fixed, right? Wentz is out, Schwellenbach is out, Waldrop is out, and so Elder's in the rotation. He's your number 5, and your long man, you're looking at some combination of Jose Suarez, Martin Perez, or somebody else. And so I get the temptation to bring up J.R. Ritchie, right? He was averaging 96 miles an hour on his fastball last year. He averaged 97.4 in his first spring start, and he averaged 97.1 in the longer outing on Friday. It's not a pure shape perspective on the 4-seam fastball. It's average. He gets 16 inches of induced vertical break. It's average. But he's got a low release point, and he has outlier vertical approach angle, meaning the line that you draw from his release point to the plate is less than 2 degrees. Every pitch thrown from the mound is being thrown downhill to the plate because you're on a hill. You're on literally a mound. But the lower your release point is, that angle down can get smaller and smaller. And the lower the angle is, the better your pitches, your forcing fastballs work up in the zone. By contrast, you look at these really tall pitchers, and they're going to do better at pitches like sinkers and things that are being thrown towards the bottom of the zone to kind of exaggerate on that vertical approach angle. You already have a larger vertical approach angle. Throw down in the zone, make it even steeper, but you have a pitch that drops, breaks to the side, whatever, right? So Fuentes, very low vertical approach angle, 1.8 degrees. The illusion that you get when you combine the lower release point, the low vertical approach angle, and at least the average backspin, the induced vertical break, is it almost looks like the ball rises, especially when you're throwing it up in the zone. And on Friday, he did a really good job of running that fastball up the ladder, getting swings and misses. He punched out, I think, Trent Grisham, Cody Bellinger. He pumped like 98 at Cody Bellinger, got a strike out of him. He changed from last year's sweeper to a gyro slider. He threw both of those in both games, and he threw a splitter on Friday as well. Now, it's not a good splitter. It was something like he didn't get chase with it. He also wasn't landing it for strikes. So he wasn't getting whiffs. He wasn't getting called strikes with the splitter. So he's really just he got 7 whiffs on 22 swings, 36% CSW. None of that came from the splitter. It was all 4-seam slider. It's a very Spencer Strider 2023-esque package. I can see the value of putting Didier Fuentes in the back of the bullpen and letting him be the long man, or making him the 6th starter to open the year. If you think that being at the major league level, surrounded by these veterans, with Jeremy Hefner there, getting the major league experience is going to help him rein in that third pitch, rein in that splitter where it can be reliable for him, or if he's good enough right now to miss bats without it. It is a risk, though. You called him up last year, and the stuff looked impressive. The results were not. It was really just 4-seam sweeper last year, which is an odd combination, especially in platoon situations. And so I can see the argument here. Because if you think about it, he's going into his second option year. If he doesn't make the opening day roster out of spring, you're going to option him down to AA. You're going to pop his second option year out of the 3 that he has. What's the difference in popping it 2 days before opening day and popping it 2 weeks after opening day? The flip side is this. Right now, Suarez, Perez, and Richie all have different things that they offer you over Didier Fuentes. Perez, veteran experience, 279 career starts, 1,600 career innings. Jose Suarez, already on the 40-man roster. He's out of options as well. And you've seen him work as both a reliever and a starter. He gave you a start last year against Washington, like 7 innings of, I think, 2 runs and a bunch of strikeouts, right? He's also a lefty. Richie has prospect promotion incentive eligibility, and he has 6 pitches, right? He's the kind of the opposite of Fuentes. Like, none of his stuff is elite, but he's got 6 pitches. He can land them all for strikes. He has a good enough package that he can at least tread water at the major league level. Fuentes very much feels like a sink or swim scenario here. So what you have to figure out is, what are you prioritizing on opening day on this decision? Are you prioritizing the potential to get a draft pick? Because if you are, Richie's the guy you keep up as the 6th starter. Maybe you put him in the pen, you leave him in the rotation, move Elder to the pen if Richie acclimates well. Richie's the guy. You have to make a 40-man roster spot for him. Good news, you've got plenty of ways to do that, because you've got Wentz can go on the 60-day, AJ Smith-Shawver can go on the 60-day. You've got multiple options here. Now, the downside of that, real quick, with Richie is, if it turns out he's not ready, you have to option him down. And you have the ability right now, because he's not on the 40-man roster, you can reassign him to minor league camp without using that first option. There is a scenario where, if your rotation's good enough this year, you can keep J.R. Richie off of the 40-man and not use his first minor league option until next year. So that's the downside with Richie. The downside with Suarez is he hasn't proven that he's that good. He's been DFA'd multiple times. He's been put on waivers multiple times. We've done it. We DFA'd him and then outrighted him during the season last year. We waived him in the offseason. The Orioles claimed him. They waived him. We got him back. So he's disposable, but it's because he hasn't proven to be that good. The issue, like the thing with Perez, the benefit you have here, other than the veteran experience, is I don't think he has an opt-out. And let me, I guess, clarify that. He does not automatically have the XXB opt-out that every XXB free agent gets. An XXB free agent, I think I've mentioned this once or twice on the show recently. I apologize if I'm repeating myself. A guy who finished last season on a major league roster or the 60-day IL and has more than 6 years of service. If you are one of those players, and the Players Association puts out a list every winter, and I didn't see them on it. If you're one of those players, and then you sign a minor league deal the next year, you have 3 automatic opt-out dates. You have 5 days before opening day. You have May 1st. You have June 1st. You can notify the team in writing that you want to exercise your opt-out, and they have to either put you on the 26-man roster, not the 40-man, the 26-man roster, so put you in the majors, or release you. They used to have the ability to like pay a bonus and keep you. They can't do that anymore. So Perez does not automatically have an opt-out. They may have given him one, but he does not automatically have one. So if you want to prioritize depth, you keep Suarez. You let him make a spot start or 2 in the first week into the season, and then you have the ability to DFA him for Karinchak or whoever. If he clears waivers, you can stick him in Gwinnett if he does not elect free agency. If you go with Perez or anybody else, Richie, Fuentes, whoever, you have to sacrifice Jose Suarez. You have to expose him to waivers. He may get claimed, right? But the thing here with Didier Fuentes is he is incredibly talented. And the ceiling of Fuentes, I would argue, is higher than even Richie. Like Richie, if he's as good as we hope he is, he could get you a PPI pick. You could have back-to-back PPI picks. The argument for Fuentes, though, is his stuff is front of the rotation caliber. Can he survive at the major league level right now? This is a good way to break him in. I see the benefit of doing this. Sean, a premium subscriber to the newsletter, had a great comment when I wrote this up for Saturday. He said, I do wonder, is this an example? And he gave like example 5 million of a highly analytical and data dependent front office who values certainty over risk, no matter the payoff, because they're being too cautious. I do think if you don't see Didier Fuentes on the opening day roster, it's because Atlanta is either one, prioritizing risk, or they're taking a certain floor of a Perez or a Suarez over a potential ceiling of a Fuentes or a Richie. They would rather know the 6 starter is going to be able to give you 4 or 5 innings, right? They may give up 3 or 4 runs, but they can give you 5 innings versus you may get Fuentes out there and he may strike out 10 over 6 scoreless innings. He may get tagged for 7 runs and 2 2/3. It's a tough question. I don't know the answer. I'm curious what you think. I'm also curious what they end up doing. We'll find out. We've got 2 weeks to opening day. I think we have 13 days, 12, 13 days to opening day. We'll find out soon enough. But that was my observations from the pitching over the weekend. I thought it was fantastic. Do me a favor, listening on audio, 5-star review would be fantastic. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode. We drop a short, we go live, all that good stuff. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.